It may give me a link. I could paste a link. Yeah, it does have a link. It may give me a link. I could paste a link. Yeah, it does have a link. It may give me a link. I could paste a link. What I can't do is turn the sound off on the. There we go. I think. No. Right, kill. Oh, there we go. Yeah. All right. Otherwise, I will be hearing myself back in the background. Let us do a quick. Uh, right, I'm going to quickly post that on some social media. No one will actually care. No one will come, but it will make us, it will create this notion of presence that might be helpful to us. All right. Let's start with the PRs, my friend. Okay, should we head up from kind of the bottom? This one, Tom's.
Are you
Um,
share something? I can.
oh, sorry, mate. Good call. There we are. Thanks, buddy. All right. This is Tom's. So I think the shape of this looks a bit better now, but I wanted to talk to you because I know you've been looking at some icon figure stuff as well. So uh, there's a few comments that got dropped in by Copilot, which I think we need to get Tom to resolve, and they're particularly to do with creation of an options and creation of an options, which may be a refactoring thing that's happened here. And obviously what happens is this one returns basically, this one creates a different config to this one, which then gets passed further down the line. So we need to clean that up a bit. Um, but overall, I think it's looking a lot better because it's removed many of the, I believe, the use statements that were concerning me that they would pollute our interface, and we're actually now building off the existing ones. So I think this is in a better place. What I could do with you having doing is though is having a review against your iConfigure stuff, letting me know whether or not there's any conflict of interest between the two. If not, we can probably just ask Tom to uh, see if he can fix those options or at least comment on why that might not be appropriate, and then we can probably pull this one in. Seem good?
Yeah, I think there
Yeah.
is no conflict. Conflict.
I didn't assume there
Yeah.
was, but I just wanted you to have a look because I know you're working in this area. And if you say this one's okay, we can just say to Tom, if you get that issue around the uh, scope of the outer options hiding the inner one sort of fixed, then we can um, get that working. Okay, this is your generated base test suite, which we've looked at before. Currently, is focused on generating tests for outboxes.
Yeah.
Um, no tests. We can review what the latest Claude code comments were. Claude gets a little bit less valuable towards the end. So we've got a well-documented AI, clean code, comprehensive test coverage, sync and async is good. MIT license headers. So um, we might need those. Just check on those if they're missing. So we like to have the MIT license in the source files, just so folks know what our licensing is. There's a couple of places where we're lacking XML docs. Again, that's our standard, and it helps with things like IntelliSense. It also will help agents if they read the source. Um,
I, yeah.
and a few, the usual tiny spelling mistakes, basically, etc. Um, I don't know what it's quite saying here. Effectively, it is there an implication that we need some tests for the way the generator works that don't exist today?
I
Or are
don't
we just
think.
relying on running the code and getting a test and then being able to run it?
Yeah, I think the test is just to run. If it's failed to generate something, we know it's going to fail. It's like, so, yeah, I think
Yeah,
there is
I guess the
no need
question
for
would
that.
be, do you test the process of being able to generate something via the generator? Can you, because there are a couple of scenarios we'd probably care about, right? One is I can create this little thing from a template, right? So test template. And the second one I could update that because we want to have this notion that uh, we may change output test. So I'm going to use a messaging example because it's going to be just easier for me to talk about that because that's present right now. And that is that when I come to do universal DLQ, although I write some tests against the in-memory consumer and how it works, I'll probably also need to add tests for all of our transports to say, do you use the DLQ properly in response to, say, this new reject message action? Ultimately, if I'd done that post us having generated tests, what that would be is I would need to go in and alter the generated tests to say, okay, I need a generated test which does that. And my question is, and I would need to update an existing test run. So you could say, okay, regenerate the tests and put in this new test. Now, my assumption is probably I would write it against in memory, and then I would effectively then want to put it into the generated tests somehow, and or write it as a user defined in memory, add it to in memory the generated test when I got it working, and then delete it from user defined, push that out to everything. But that kind of loop is something we'd effectively need tests for to show it can be done, right? To show you can alter existing tests, or you can add new tests into the generation. Um, so I don't know whether we need something around test for the tool itself. I don't know that I necessarily wouldn't approve this because we are iterating, right? So I might
Yeah,
approve this, but we might want to wonder whether there are tests that the tool itself has other than just I run it.
it's since it's like generating the test. I don't think we need like when we
Okay.
develop
But what
like
happens, right? If I'm updating and then because I have a failure in the test generation process for some reason, I then wipe out all your tests and all your repos. I mean, okay, you could revert, but it could be that I'm making a global change, right? If I add a new feature, I update the standard tests. I want to update the standard tests in all the repos. If there are no tests, can I be sure that I'm going to generate that successfully?
there's no test. Yeah, yeah. So like today I have a script that generate iterating going all our test folder to
Mm.
generate. So if there is no uh, test to have generated, it's going just to skip it.
Yeah, but how do I
But
know I won't break existing things?
yeah, you need to run you need to run the tool every time
Yeah,
you change a test. Some test in that tool, you need to run it
yeah,
and
but
see.
given it's adding new things, would I not feel more comfortable that I was able to run the test generator tool to prove it was working before I then use the generator tool to do that generation, right? Because if someone's changed the generator tool at some point, how do I know it works? Because the answer
Uh,
is, if the answer is, well, when you run the generator tool, you will blow away all the tests, and if it's failed, um, what happens if the generator tool accidentally deletes all the tests, right? Would I know immediately? And if I don't know immediately, I could be several iterations down the line before I realized, oh, we lost 5 tests or whatever. Um, so I just think I might be concerned that there's no proof of the generator tool, right, that we could run.
yeah,
Oh,
I get those points, but for me, like if you're changing the generate test, you're probably going to run the generate test against something. So you're going to have your test running, but okay, I can create this test. So it's going to be like end-to-end test, integrate test, because I need to have another project that I need to on the pipeline run the generate tested. Well, I can use the
Yeah, so that's what I think we need to do. The two workflows I think we need to think about are one is I update the tool in some way itself. I make a fix to the tool. How do I prove that fix to the tool works without being forced to trash an existing uh, outbox or transport in order to do that? Can I get feedback that the tool works without doing that? It doesn't have to be 100%, but can I get feedback that the tool works without doing that? And two, what do we think our documented process is for I add a new test to the standard tests and I want to roll that out? So, like I say, I don't think that stops me approving this one because we're iterative, but I think we need to think about those issues of how do I know the tool is working before I run it? And how do, because running it and going, okay, now I'm going to run the tool, oh, I've trashed all my tests. Okay, revert everything. That's a bit of a pain, right? If I could have flushed those issues out earlier, that would be good. I don't know. Toby, have you got an opinion?
Um,
So if you know about this one, so what Rafa's working on is, which is really good, is we've for ages already said, why don't we have standard test suites for a transport,
yep.
standard test suites for an outbox or an inbox, so that effectively you should pass this standardized test suite rather than having to re-implement every time you do the transport or an outbox.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, we talked about it forever.
Yeah, so the idea is this code would generate those tests for you. So the first version is when Rafa's working on, we'll do outboxes, then we do gateways. The question is, there are no jet tests for the generator. So the only way we're currently proposing testing the generator is to run the generator and see what the output looks like, whether the tests run or not. And my thing is, actually, we should have tests for the generator itself because you would need some confidence before once you have existing tests,
Yeah,
as
because
opposed to I am iterating through making the tool work. Once I now have my existing tests are all created by this tool. So we're talking about having a bucket for a given, say, outbox or a given gateway that says, here are the standard test folder, here is my user-defined test folder. So you can add stuff, right? But I want to feel that tool is safe to run when we say, oh, the standard tests have been updated, so we should run this against all of our existing repos and add this standard test in and see what breaks, right? Um, then I would want to know the test runner was working in case someone had made modifications to it since I'd last used it, because it could sit on the shelf for 6 months and not be touched, right? I want to feel that that's passing green tests. We know that's working. I'm okay to run that tool against my existing repos. I don't know, but maybe I'm being too paranoid.
no, I can see where you're coming from. It's yeah, if it's gonna wipe out my tests and recreate them from scratch, I'm like, well, what have you changed? What's happened? I have no idea. I mean, you could look at the Git commit and see what's changed. You will see it in the Git commit. So if you regenerate, you'll see what changes are being created by the tool. No? Yeah.
Um, it's two things. Both the code that the are two separate things. One is
What has been tested?
what is the tests that have changed? That's slightly different, right? But also, I'm less worried about that in the sense that, sure, I generate tests from a template, but I need to understand the process for doing that and more. But more, what about the generator itself? There are no tests for the generator other than running the generator. And so the other question there, Rafa, would be typically things like, let's say Toby or I want to modify the generator. Would we feel comfortable modifying the generator by a process that says, um, hey, what you do to modify this is you run it and then you look at the output and then you decide whether you succeeded or not? Or would we rather have, hey, there are some tests here that will tell me whether the change I've made to the generator passes the existing tests? So, I mean, you'd be modifying effectively, files like this. would we feel comfortable that I'd made a change and the only way to test that change is to effectively regenerate a target? I think I understand why you can do that right now, because effectively it's the first time we're using it and you are generating effectively a new, um, a new folder at best inside an existing project or whatever. But
Yeah, because I need to have so I need you to have a like a sample that can run because I need to run the test, then run the .NET compiler because once you generate the test, it's not 100% guarantee that it's going to compile because you only know if the generation is good. If to run the pipe generator, then you try to compile because you could missing some keywords or some like comma, dot comma, semicolons.
okay, yeah, some arguments or whatever. Yeah, yeah. All right, I don't want to spend the whole meeting on it. I think it's worth having a think about the fact that basically the generator has no tests. You've got some public classes. In theory, they are you can put them under test. Um, and we need to think about what the workflow is for two things, right? One is I change the tool itself. How do I get feedback? Is the only feedback I can get to build the whole thing, because that's a long feedback loop, as opposed to actually there are tests that run against the test generator itself. And two is what's my process for updating the base tests? How do I do that? Right? Is that I am forced to run it against an existing repo to see if it works. Um, Now, maybe that's what happens, but then we might need to think about, do we do something where I can pick the target folder name so I can generate the tests in that folder and a temporary name, run them, and if they work, delete the old one and rename basically the new one, right? But what's our migration strategy, right? So I just think it needs a bit of thought. I'm not suggesting I'm not going to approve and we can't move forward, but I think that we need to think about processing. How will other people work with update this tool? How will other people update standardized tests?
I update the contributing file. So yeah, my idea is just to run the generate script. So it's going to go to all your the test folder, and regenerate for everybody.
Okay, so say I've got a bug in the generator.
So if you have a bug in the generator, probably everything's going to fail. So you need to understand what's failing, fix
So how
the.
do I understand what's failing?
So depending on type of error. So if it's compiled, you're going to try to compile your process. So you're going to get this on CI in the first step because the
Okay,
build is not going to
so
work.
so the compiler has told me that the build has failed because the thing that has been generated is wrong. It's not valid C sharp. How do I fix it?
So you need to go to the liquid file and see what is wrong in that liquid file.
Yeah, what happens if the problem is not in the file, but seems to be in the problem with the generation process itself?
So yeah, and you need to debug and see some output, what he's generate or what he's trying to generate. Yeah, then try to fix it.
So,
But
so,
it's going to
so,
be
yeah. So, arguably, if you think about the test pyramid, basically the bottom, right, has, things that are faster, things that are more binary. At the top, it has things that are slower and things that are non-binary. So the problem is all the testing of this is at the top of the pyramid, right? There's no testing at the base of the pyramid where I get fast binary feedback on a change because I don't have unit tests. So I've no way of getting fast feedback on a change that I make to the generating engine itself. Um, and I have no real fast feedback of being able to point to say a given test and say generate that and tell me if there are or lint it, etc. So I'm not saying again, I want to repeat, I'm not saying I'm not going to approve, but I think before this tool becomes something we can use day to day, we need to understand how to solve those problems. We need fast binary feedback of some form about changes made to the test generator. It would be useful if we could have some kind of feedback on tests that I add, other than the process of recreating. Because, I come in and I'm like so used to using the tool as UREF, and I want to make it. I decided there's a new feature that an outbox needs, so I need to create a test for that, right? And I need to figure out how do I create that test for that thing. Now, one option is for me to go and create a user-defined test or an in-memory test first of all, right? That says here is the test for the new feature. I'm going to create a user-defined test initially till I get it passing, and then I'm going to say, okay, I need to add this to the generic test. It's an out feature all the outboxes should have, right? But how do I then, I've altered that and then I generate the test and work through. My process at the minute looks very long-winded of lots of runs and repeats, etc. So all I'm asking is how can I make that process easier, right? Have a ponder. I mean, this is really great work, mate. Please don't misunderstand that. But I'm just pondering that workflow problem of how are Toby and I going to use this?
Yes.
Are we? Because the danger is everyone just goes, oh crap, I better get hold of RAF or I can't regenerate the tests, right? That is not what we want, right? We want it to be really easy to figure out how you work with the generator. And while we got just on Outbox, it's an easy enough figure out the scenario, solve the problem, right? So that we understand how we're going to fix it. But the lack of fast binary tests is definitely a smell.
That makes sense. It's
Okay.
to me, it feels like something's
All right, Destiny folder, destination folder. I quite like Destiny folder as a name, actually. Maybe we should just leave it as Destiny folder.
This is your destiny.
Yeah. Okay. You might be able to get AI to honestly help you write a slightly more robust shell script. Yeah. I don't know quite what it means there. You might want to have a quick look at your code and see if that's relevant.
Yeah, probably it's because I copy a lot of things from this Outlook text, but at some point I'm going to remove this one. So like once I'm going to merge this one, then once I have merged this one, I'm going to work with others out of the box implementation to generate for that as well. Then I can delete this file.
Okay. So I think most of this feedback is probably about fair from Claude. I've looked at it and I think it's great. I think the template stuff is clear, the liquid templates to do generation. And like I say, I think this can make an enormous difference to us. The fact that you can just generate a standardized test suite that you need to pass, right? That's an enormous win for contribution by human beings or AI. If we get this working. So I'm really positive about this stuff. But let's just think about that feedback loop length.
Yeah.
All right. Next on the list. Add support to configuration to Brighter from iConfiguration. All right. Toby, if you've not seen this one, you might be excited. Let me find something I can. Yeah, there's a oops, nice ADR to read. Talks about basically, the fact that we really haven't picked up on iConfiguration as a standard previously. We should. It makes it easy to work with Aspire. There is a nice thing I saw someone, Chris Ayers demo the other day, which I've not really been aware of, is the ability to use options and to do validation. That could be really powerful for us because we know that configuration is one of our weak spots in the sense that it's painful. And have given people the ability to give very specific feedback that says you are incorrectly configured and this is why would be enormously helpful if we could get to that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we're introducing iConfiguration, right? Blah blah blah, and that is the Rafa's got a kind of I am a configuration abstraction that will help us work with Microsoft configuration, which contains the iConfiguration, which is cool. And that looks quite neat. So there are various changes in various places. I don't know what's the key file here, do
So
you think?
there is like you can go to the program CS, so you can see how it's being used.
Which one go to?
There is like a
Oh, you mean
RabbitMQ
running
algorithm.
a
Yeah,
sample
yeah,
one?
Yeah, just go
yeah.
to the app, the receiver app program.
All
Let's
right.
go down.
Yeah. Just
Yeah, so you say options dot host configuration dot create subscription, and you need to pass the what subscription you want. I try to my first what I try to do first is generate everything that Writer has. Like you can set up Kafka, SNS, and SQS. Then I discover for app domain work, you need to load the TTL, and it's only going to load once you are using this in some place.
Okay.
So that's why I'm forcing you to use the type. So the idea of this one, I'm going to create a subscription for you. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm going to create a subscription with the correct assemblies.
And so the subscription would presumably be based off stuff that's effectively in various settings. Here we go.
Yeah, do you see here the environment? So publications,
okay. Yeah, it
and
looks
I
like
think
the
you are
the
looking at the
spiders.
publication. Yeah, if you go up, there's another app settings. It's for set for go up more, more. You can go one more. Yeah, so you see these app settings is for subscription. So on RabbitMQ, I have the connection, everything that you have in the connection, and the ideas have a subscription and publication. So you can set up everything via configuration. Now, I start thinking only Aspire and get like the connection, but at the end I start thinking, maybe it's going to be easier if we can just grab this from configuration.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not opposed to this, right? I mean, we liked the idea of being able to create stuff in code more, so you could see the subscription. I still think we want to support that. So I think we need to make sure we balance between the two so that you could effectively pull that information in to be the thing that sets the property, because I like the capacity for you to read the code rather than having forced to flip to another file.
I'm the same. I'm like all the subscription stuff. I'd rather see in code. Connection strings. I
Yeah.
don't really care. I'd rather get. You need to get them from Kit configuration, so it's fine.
So as I said before, we had this model once, right, where effectively everything was in config, and we moved to say let's put it all in a type where effectively you get a lot of feedback from the and you get IntelliSense and everything else to help you build it. So I'm good with us supporting for those people that want it, the ability to define the sort from config. But what like to also be able to do is say, um, hey, I'm actually going to do the subscription, but what I really want to get is the gateway value, right?
Yeah, yes, if you go to the brighter code,
Help me
go
now.
down, go more. There is like I am a messaging gateway configuration down. Yeah, this one, this file. So this one I have a lot of interface, a lot of math, like to get the message configuration, channel configuration. So you can select whatever you want. It's not restrict only to consumers and publishers. So you can get from any basically any interface that we require.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
there's one implementation for RabbitMQ. So you can take a look.
Yeah. Because I guess what I'd like to see is a program file where, um, rather than saying here, I mean, alongside, they're not saying get rid of this, but I'm saying alongside this, I'd like to see something that says, I can pass in an RMQ producer registry factory who effectively has got its gateway property from configuration
Yeah, yeah, I understand. Yeah,
gateway, whatever. Because my preference is definitely, and like I say, very happy that we support this, but my preference would be for a thing where we have a type. Uh, find the bloody thing now. Let's try just doing that. Okay, yeah. For a thing where you have a type like a subscription, that I can set these properties in code, but I can, if you like, call out to the config system to get a given value. So, for example, I mean, some of these values would be that tend to be the ones that would change by platform, right? So let's say I'd have a much longer timeout locally for debug, and I put a shorter timeout in production. I'd want to be able to pull just that value to have to set up just that value here and then pull that into the RM into my subscription. Because here what I've done is lost really any typing info and help and IntelliSense help to set this up. Right. What I
yeah,
want to do is create my RMQ subscription, but say some of these values will vary by platform, and so you should read it from there. I know that's a big ask because you won't do that auto magically because you can't auto magically say um, override parts of the value or whatever, factor, etc. But you'd pick and you'd say these are parts of the RMQ subscription where I want to pull that value from config,
It's
and
for,
I and it will then use the configuration model of pulling from the highest priority, like CLI event, environmental variables, config files to get that particular value. But I'd be interested in being able to get some of these values would be ones I could pull from here, but I'm not compelled to be either I can put it in config or I can't. That makes sense.
yeah, yes. Just think because we don't have like a set in generating our subscriptions. For a publisher, I think it's going to be fine. But for subscription, I think it's going to be more tricky because many things it's only on constructor. Um, but yeah, okay. I
And then
will
Toby,
think
what do
something.
you think? Go on.
Some
This is a lot your space more than mine.
Thanks. Um, yeah, it's weird. It's kind of like we did this, and now we're going back to it. And I mean, there are some people who love this. They just love to do it this way. But yeah, I think as you said, there are some things that maybe we shouldn't allow people to do in config. Um,
fine
I don't,
also
I
to
don't,
have only this via only get the connection or message gateway. I just think it is because when I start to do it, maybe it's going to be a good idea. But if you think it's not, I don't mind to.
I, 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 I think I take this middle ground where I don't mind that it's possible, but I also don't want this to be, I wouldn't prefer that people do it this way. I would prefer that they create a explicit RMQ subscription.
yep.
What I would like more is that the properties of the RMQ subscription, I could call something that would read them from the config chain. So now the messaging gateways, absolutely, you could probably just do the whole thing, right? Because they're usually two or three parameters or whatever, and you'd say just read the gateway config from the configuration file. You can still do it by hand and you should still be able to do it by hand if you want to for local testing, but you could say, whatever environment you might just choose to pull the whole thing because usually it's two or three. But certainly when you get to subscription, I think only some of those values would I really benefit from uh, making them uh, independent per environment. Most of them they're going to be the same per environment. And I would rather put that in code and then vary the stuff that is environmentally variable. Does that make sense? So again, fine to support this. But the sweet spot for Brighter is I declare a new RMQ subscription and two of its properties are pulled from the config. And you would explicitly say this property equals, so you would effectively say you'd write your subscription, but you'd say, okay, the wait for confirms timeout milliseconds, go to the config tool chain and get the wait for confirm timeout in milliseconds from that, because that varies by platform. So the one that I expect probably we pick up a lot for this is security, right? Where effectively people are using to need to put creds, which is why I suspect it's much more to do with this, the connection, that effectively is much more likely to be where people want to vary it by platform, because even the name of the exchange might vary by environment, right? So this one, I think 100% people probably might just take the whole thing from config, right? This one, I think most of this doesn't vary by too much by platform, but maybe it does in some cases. Maybe in some cases your topic name varies by platform, right? So I'd want to be able to put this in, but I'd also want to be able to mix the model that says actually most of this is code, but this thing is pulled from an environment variable, etc. Right?
You do
Does that
that
make sense?
iConfig stuff. Is there like a hierarchy of which one you read it from? If you read it from the initial stuff, all comes from config, and then the rest, if you got an override, if you override it with code, I assume that would work that way. I don't know.
Well, I think it's you could pull the one then yeah, you can. You can write so you could do a thing where we say uh create the producer registry like this, and then you could override individual settings explicitly. Like you could do that. So you say configuration create producer registry would give you the producer registry, and then you better set stuff. But it doesn't quite work like that. I don't think, because the
So
RMQ producer registry factory consists of subclasses that you'd want to actually set that create the producer factory. So you'd want to intercept it before you do create producer registry, because you would want to effectively intercept it at the point where you set up the connection string and things like that.
So what I'm thinking about, so I'm going to only do it for gate message gateway and open a ticket on issue in Git, so we can discuss more about this and say what other people think about this.
So I think that you want both, right? I don't think I want to lose because we explicitly moved to code-based configuration because we had this model before and we
Yeah,
explicitly moved. So it's a Chesterton Svens problem, right? Don't remove that without fixing the reasons we tended to move. And the reason is basically strong typing, visibility of what's going on. However, I think for any given property of the classes in config, you may want to pull that property from configuration. I don't know that you want to pull whole classes out of configuration all the time, but you might. But what you'd need is a model which let you put subscription into app settings.json, but only had, for example, topic, right? Didn't have anything else. And you effectively were never going to try and reconstruct publication from that. You just wanted to put that, you just need the topic varied by environment. Because at the minute, this is a bit all or nothing, right? Where effectively the only way I get to play with config is to lose the strong type safety of having classes in my config. Whereas what I want to say is I want to pull given values uh, into and populate my actual class type with that, right? So I can't really um, sort of sketch out easily on here. But what I'd really like to do is down here say I am creating a producer registry factory, but I'm setting its properties from config, not that I am creating the whole thing from config. Right.
okay, no problem. Yeah, I didn't know we had this model before, then move it to.
I think we
Vue.
mentioned it in uh I certainly mentioned the conversation in the iConfig, the other one perhaps. Yeah, I perhaps didn't mention it here. Yeah, maybe I didn't mention this one. So that's my bad, probably. I've not specifically mentioned that we moved away. There is an ADR, which I think Claude did refer you to. So there's a specific ADR. It might be in the issue actually. Um, yeah, this one, ADR 16. Um, so we say we want configuration as code, but it may not be explicit enough about what that actually means.
Okay, no problem.
So but I think this is good, right? I think it just needs a tweak. It needs a tweak to say what we actually want you to do in most cases is use the class, but we want to be able to set the properties of that class from config. However, I don't know that we shouldn't also not support this, right? So what I'm saying is I think we probably should support for people that really want to do it. You can put all of your subscription and config information into config. I think we probably should support that model, even though it's not our preference. But what I'd prefer to support first is I take my classes, but I can get the properties of those classes from config. So in my head more, the RMQ gateway connection, the way that it works is in the presence of uh, Aspire or whatever, right? Is that uh, sure, you've got defaults here, but it can effectively pull those values from Aspire essentially. And that's more, I think, what we're trying to solve initially is saying,
Yeah.
can we pull those values out and set them on RMQ rather than saying, I want to do set the whole subscription from config.
Yeah, okay. I will remove the subscription publication.
Yeah,
I will only let the uh,
yeah.
message
What
to
we should,
create. Yeah.
yeah, what we should probably do as well, either you can do it or I can go in and do it, is be a bit more explicit in that ADR about what we mean to help other people, right? So the fact that you have bumped into this issue means we have not been explicit enough in the ADRs. Know if we've wasted some of your time by saying we want to actually have a class that you set properties on from config over your serializing information back and forth.
Okay.
Um, I think my memories is also works a lot better with things like tests and everything else, right? I think before we had problems, you have to reach it out of config files and that. And it's just a lot. I'd rather work with the actual objects. So, all right. All right. Probably last one. We're close. This one's from me. It's mostly just an ADR at this point, which Claude is giving us feedback on. What is this one? So we only have some providers that support explicit dead letter channels. Particular problem here is streams. While we have taken a strong position in the past saying, hey, if you're on a stream, that channel doesn't really make a lot of sense. Um, some people effectively want the simplicity of workflow around moving things that are error messages as far as they're concerned into a given stream. So there are a couple of things that we might want to do. One is say, okay, where we effectively allow you to do retry with delay, and we existingly say that's up to a certain count, and we move to DLQ, we just support that universally. So someone can do retry with delay. Now we've got the scheduler that Rafa put in across any of our messaging frameworks, and we will essentially, when we've retried a certain number of times, just add the message into the DLQ as before. But we'll also do the thing we've avoided in the past, which is to say, if you really explicitly want to say when something, if I have an error in my handler that I really want to say, nah, no, I'm going to basically reject this, but I want to keep a copy of the message. will start offering you a reject message action. So it's a bit like defer message action lets you say you throw it and we will defer, we will do a retry delay. Reject message action says we will mark this message as act effectively, and we will put a message on the DLQ for you. And we will then support creating DLQs for things that don't have DLQs like Kafka by you give us basically a topic and we will, as part of our Kafka message consumer setup, we will create a producer that can produce to those topics. We're not using command processor deliberately explains that here because one of the things we also can pick up this way is we can let you create an invalid message channel and we can let you send messages that fail to deserialize correct to that channel as well. So we'll set up both of those and we'll support two interfaces. Um, One is I use Brighter Dead Letter support, and the other is I use Brighter Invalid Message support, and we will determine what your support is. And there's a open question whether we have a fallback, which is effectively, hey, if you get an invalid message, but you don't have invalid message support, but you do have Brighter Dead Letter support, we'll just write those to the dead letter queue, right? Because some folks just put it all in the dead letter queue. For folks that like the idea of error queues, despite the fact that I hate them, they can abuse their dead letter queue to do that. That's okay. In the end, we will warn them against doing that, but we will enable it. I may also create an attribute that basically says you can have a backstopper that basically sort of like errors go to DLQ, um, or reject all errors or something that might call it, where effectively we just write one of our um, pieces of middleware that says in the event an exception bubbles out to me, I will immediately throw a reject message action. The thing is, today, what is happening is people are using our fallback handler to do that, and they are effectively listening for exceptions and posting it onto their own error queue. So even if we say probably the wrong thing to do, um, people can do it and they will do it, and we may be better off providing support. There's a whole bunch of customers who, for whatever reason, like mass transit supports it, whatever, have got used to this model, and we probably need to give them a way of converting across to Brighter to do it. That makes sense. It's mostly an ADR, so you can go and read the ADR and you can put comments in the conversation about things you hate about it. I'm steadily working on it, but at this point, all I've got is a couple of things like this, which is reject message action, which needs some additional comments, and a interface called I support, and which needs to have a question mark on it. So it's very, very, I am toying with it, but that's where we are. All right. Any feedback? You can be as brutal with the feedback as I've been with you, my friends. So do feel free to chop apart the idea.
Yeah, I also don't like much to have this on string, but if it's a lot of people asking for this, I know one guy he made some PR for us. He was asking about this support. That
He
letter
is, yeah,
K.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but yeah, I prefer to keep people do because any people can want to do different strategy for uh, that letter queues. But yeah, seems to be something we need to have it.
I think in the docs we just need to explain. It does say in the ADR right here, um, somewhere. I've got it on my local machine. I haven't pushed it up. I've got basically a bullet pointed. Where should you use deferred message action? Where should you just let the exceptions bubble out? Where should you really get into the world of saying, I want to do a reject message, right, explicitly? Um, one advantage of reject message being able to do it explicitly is, though, if you decide you don't want to go through a retry, you explicitly want to skip over it, it will work for that. And on a queue, it would actually work to do, let's delete it. But if we don't want to delete it, let's, put it on the queue, right? So, and delete the queue rather than basically make it available to somebody else, right? So I think it'll have value. It helps people with some scenarios. I think overall we are, in some cases, accepting that other frameworks have established ideas that even if we think they are wrong, we probably need to support in order to provide an alternative to uh, those frameworks that, particularly when they've gone commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
But feel free to comment on this one, right? You'll probably get ahead of me doing a whole load. So feel free to read it, have a comment, and ping me. I do want to say, Rafa, because we've been a bit tough on a couple of your PRs. I do want to say, though, they are really well done. There are great ADRs, help enable us to understand it and actually have a conversation about it. So, all power to you. They are great. And some of it a little bit. The problem, particularly with the configuration one, is on me and Toby for not really having, documented clearly enough, perhaps, some of their decision-making process. So I apologize to you for that.
Don't worry, it's part of. That's why they are in. One of them needs draft to see get feedback.
Yeah.
And I don't mind to revert some changes.
Yeah, but I think having full support for iConfiguration is fantastic. We just need to figure out how we use it as opposed to the more standard mechanism of me using it, which is to say, I want to be able to summon properties to summon values from configuration to fill in individual properties. And hopefully then we will be able to pick up things from Aspire to write into, say, our connection or whatever. And then maybe we can think about whether there are specific helper methods that would really help us. Of the ones where you say, I might like to just read that directly from config, I think the obvious one is to say support doing that for connections, because that is the one where probably most of the information there does vary by platform, and you'll probably just end up, does it really get me a lot to get the connection out? So you can support both of those, I think, models there. I can either set the property or I could just read the whole goddamn thing, because typically it's tier 3 properties. It's the subscription and publication, I think, that are more problematic there. Right. And I think it's also the connection is the one we will get out of Aspire, right? So separating those two means you just go to Aspire and get the connection information, and then we add that into the factory, etc., along with publication. So I think just goes slightly one level up.
Yeah.
All right. I will kill the stream at this point. Let's wave goodbye.